about 1:30 because this can kind of be a little bit short sometimes. We'll see where it goes.
Would you like to not have to hold your mic?
No.
Make that stand?
I actually really like not being behind the podium that's as tall as me. And it's true, and I'm actually not using the screen. It's this phenomena of not having slides. So it's a bold move. It really is. I gave this talk at ThoughtCon earlier this year, and I was wrestling with this decision. You know, I went to go prepare my talk, and the first thing you do is you open your laptop and you open up PowerPoint and you go to make a slide deck. And I said, how do I make a slide deck for this? Like, there's really not material that would be anything other than me reading from slides. I could just make like a slideshow of cats and you guys could watch that, which, you know, I kind of have regrets that I didn't do that. But, you know, I wrestled with this decision because, you know, it's a professional thing, right? Like, I'm a professional and I'm giving my professional opinion. And when you're a professional, people ask you, where were your slides? I said, I don't have any. Does that make me not a professional? And then I realized I was wrestling with imposter syndrome about my talk about imposter syndrome. So I'm just going to wing it. If you guys saw that talk and you wanted this to be the same, too bad, because this is a totally different talk. You know it's a totally different talk because I have completely different hand-scribbled notes on a completely different hotel's note paper. So yeah, we're just gonna have some chat time about the things that I've picked up from my years in this industry and in this community, and hopefully it'll help you overcome some of the same challenges that I have. So real quick, who is this random person just like with verbal diarrhea in front of you? I am Jesika McEvoy. I'm a manager of deployments and training services at Rapid7. What that means is that I still do deployments, but now they trust me with like 7 people that I'm supposed to grow and mentor, and that is really terrifying. Like, these people apparently trust me enough to consider me a mentor and leader, and that's a lot of faith for people to have in me because I'm totally faking it. I've been in this industry for years. Let's just say that my tenure is old enough to drink. And as in all of the years that I've been around, I can't say that I'm faking it any less today than I was then. I actually got here on accident. My studies, for those who know me, you already have heard this story. I studied aerospace engineering. I really wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force, found out I couldn't, decided to go on with my studies and literally became a rocket scientist. Yes, the jokes just write themselves. And I found out that that is a cool thing, and every now and then you launch some rockets, and sometimes they arrive at Mars with great force, and sometimes they make it out to the Kuiper Belt. So yay! But it wasn't something that I was passionate about, and the people that I was working with, they had this side project. People that I knew online, they said, "Hey, we're working on this anonymity project. I heard you can code. Do you want in on this?" I said, sure, that sounds interesting. I don't know what that means, but cool. And I worked with them on that project, and they said, so there's this big hacker thing in the desert in Vegas, and we thought they might be interested in this, so why don't we go hang out there and talk to people about this? I said, cool. Vegas sounds awesome. I've never been there. I have been eating those words ever since. But what I found there was a community of people that were, in a word, inspiring. The way that they thought, the way that they were excited and passionate about what they were doing, it was incredible. At the time, this was a number of years ago, it was a very small community. I know that's hard to picture today. It was a very small, very intimate gathering, and everyone was doing something really cool. Everyone was doing something really innovative. I didn't understand a word of what was being said. I had a notebook with me. It was adorable. I actually went to talks and I took notes. I still have that notebook today. And one day I looked back at it, and at some point it started making sense. I don't know when I learned all this stuff, but I could read my notes and it was stuff that I knew. I was like, cool, I guess I learned something. Because in the process of being here on accident, I discovered a community. And in that community, I was living in Texas, and at the time, there was apparently a very large Pacific Northwest contingent. And after that, crazy show in the desert, one year I went home to Texas, and every one of my friends went home to Seattle. I said, I should probably go out there. Didn't look at a map. I'm actually very phobic of bridges. So I had a few regrets. But what I found there was basically, as I described to a friend in my first week, DEFCON with jobs. We partied all night, but then we had to wake up for work in the morning. And let me tell you, if I weren't in my 20s at the time, that is not something I would survive today. But it was a pretty crazy time because not only was I out partying every night, but I was out partying with these people that I respected who were really brilliant people. And anything a good leader knows is that the company that you keep is a reflection of you. You are represented by the people that surround you. And I surrounded myself with these people that I respected, that I thought very highly of, and they set the bar really high. That bar was way up here. And it turns out that when the bar is up here, you can't help but at least be here. Like you're not even stretching. You're just being carried along with the current, and you end up here. And you look back at that notebook and you're like, when did I learn this? That's really weird, because everyone that was around me was really, really smart. They were way smarter than me. And I was just going along with the crowd. And that right there is imposter syndrome. Along that year, in my first year there, the more time that I spent with them, I was learning. I was actually learning this industry and becoming an expert myself. I was establishing my own presence. I had my own ideas. I had my own thoughts. But all I could see was that I wasn't as smart as everyone else. And this kind of culminated with, I'd been working in operations, security operations for a cruise line, and, looking at their firewalls and running the vulnerability scans and managing the IDS, all those things. And we were a very small shop because, a cruise line doesn't have a lot of systems. And I was talking with my leadership, and they were thinking, it would be neat if this security thing kind of took off and became its own thing. And we can really see you in like a manager role in the next year or so. And a couple of years down the road, definitely get you pushed into a director role. And then we'll probably just carve this off as its whole thing, entirely and just put you in as a VP over that. And I said, whoa, I've literally been doing this for 6 months. This is the only environment that I know. How can I be an expert on this if I've never seen anything else? And that wasn't imposter syndrome. That was legitimately me realizing I was not qualified for this, path that they were describing to me. And so I realized that is ultimately where I wanted my career to go. So I took the crash course in best practices. I became a consultant, doing pen tests for a consultancy that was pretty established at the time. And again, I thought, this is a great growth opportunity for me. I am surrounded by these really brilliant people, and I'm going to learn from them, and they're going to mentor me. And in a couple of years, I'll have seen so many different environments that I'll know what not to do, what to do. It's going to be great. What I didn't think about is that in addition to me learning from them, that they were going to expect me to go out on my own and do some of this work myself, me. It was terrifying. I shadowed a few engagements, and then they were like, oh, right, go off, do it. And, I go back home, and I'm having cocktails with, DEFCON with jobs. And Dan Kaminsky was the sounding board for this particular rant. And I remember that because in the middle of my freak out, serious panic attack, freak out. I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm faking it. They're going to figure this out. How am I supposed to go do this engagement? in the middle of this freakout, he gave me the best piece of advice I've ever heard in my life that I've carried with me all of these years. He looked at me and he says, Octo, we are all faking it. The trick is figuring it out before your customer does. It's true. And I thought this is a really interesting phenomenon. And through the years, I've come to realize that we've talked about imposter syndrome in the context of gender, but it's not a gender-specific issue. The more that I talk to my friends, the more that I talk to my colleagues, the more that I talk to my peers, the more that I interview guys with, that underrepresent themselves on their resumes, the more I realize this is specific to our industry. And not just InfoSec, IT as a whole, technology as a whole. And I believe truly that the issue is that we're working with a moving target. You can never be an expert in everything. When I got into this industry, vuln scanning was a new thing. Firewalls, checking by signature was a new thing. Stateful firewalls weren't even a glimmer in someone's eye yet. Like, the technology pool was very small. And it was easy to be an expert in security at the time because that meant understanding basic network controls, crunchy on the outside, squishy in the middle, and Unix. If you knew Unix and basic networking, you could be a security expert because that was the breadth of it. Yes, Windows existed. We don't talk about those days. And it was really easy to become disenchanted with this problem because as much as we grew, as much as the industry grew with us, as much as this became an industry out of our hobbies, we started to see that the innovation disappeared. We started seeing the same talks recycled from conference to conference. We started seeing that on our pen tests, it wasn't about the new hot exploit. It was about the same freaking blank SA vulnerability that we've seen on every engagement. Seriously, 85% of the customers that I have pen tested, blank SA password. like this is not an exciting problem, when we're solving the same problem over and over again. And it causes you to become a little bit disenchanted. It causes you to become jaded, and you lose your innovation. Somewhere around DEF CON too many, I noticed that I wasn't the only one feeling this way. A lot of my peers were just burned out, and no one was coming in to replace us. And that was the scary part. And I looked at it, I said, why is there no fresh blood? There's been a few people who've managed to work their way in and made some good contributions, but as a whole, it was the same old farts up on the stage that we've been seeing for the last 10 years. And I said, why is that? And then I took a look at our community through IRC and through our forums, and I realized we're a bunch of assholes. Like, historically, collectively, as hackers, we are assholes. And again, this has been discussed as an issue of gender because I've noticed that women will come into the scene and they'll say, you're not supportive, you brushed us off, all of your responses are STFU noob and lurk more. And we're just really horrible people. And don't fault me for this. I've actually used this as a defense, and I believed truly that it was a legitimate defense when these women would come with this complaint. I said, no, it's not women. We're assholes to everyone. That makes it okay. No, it really doesn't. Yeah, some of those idiots deserve it. They come onto the boards and they're like, teach me how to hack. Or, can you get into my girlfriend's Hotmail account? It sucks. It's really obnoxious. And yet we've held on to this idea. Nobody needed to teach me. Nobody showed me. Nobody pointed me in the right direction. I had to fight my way here. So why should you have it any different than I do? Why should you have the advantage of me holding your hand through this when I had to get there by myself? Well, you know what? When I started out, the technology pool was a kiddie pool. It was up to my shins, and it's like saying I learned how to tread water in the shallow end, so you should learn to swim in the Pacific Ocean with the waves crashing against you and the current pulling you down. it's such a massive pool these days, and it's such a moving target. Someone has to guide people into this industry, or they're going to realize that the movies portraying hackers, if a movie ever actually portrayed a hacker in the real sense, what we actually do from day to day, no one would go to it because they would fall asleep halfway through it. Black Hat, case in point. So how do we become a kinder, gentler community? Why would we become a kinder, gentler community? Because the reality is that innovation and new people bring new ideas. And they see things in our work that we didn't see. They're going to see the things that we completely missed by bringing their new perspective. A movie that I watched last year was The Theory of Everything. Have you seen this? The story of Stephen Hawking from the memoirs of his first wife. And from what I've heard, it was fairly accurate, so I feel confident in repeating this as a quote, even though it was totally from a fictional movie. But one of his students was questioning him later in life about a book that he had recently published, or a paper that effectively contradicted all of his early studies on the event horizon. And he said, how do you rationalize that? How do you justify the fact that this completely contradicts everything that you have said? He said, simple, I was wrong. Because we can never stop learning. We can never stop innovating. We can never stop being challenged. And the people that are going to challenge us are the people who are going to take our place when we burn out. So recognize your peers. First and foremost, the young kids coming up straight out of school, that kid asking if you can hack his girlfriend's Hotmail. Yes, they're obnoxious. Yes, we're tired of seeing the same question over and over again, but point them in the right direction. And if you point enough of them in the right direction, you'll find that a few of them stick. But go further than recognizing your peers. Beyond just recognizing them, when they have an idea, repeat it and credit them for it. I know this is a really novel idea, but it's something, again, that's been practiced in the context of gender, with women doing this in meetings to be heard, because it was something that, especially in male-dominated fields, we had to do. But in this industry of innovation, where we need those new voices, this holds for everyone. If someone has a really good idea, repeat it. Oh, hey, Jeff was saying that he was thinking we could do this, and I thought that's a great idea, and we can expand on it in this way. And then Amy says, yeah, you know what? I had some ideas to go on Jeff's idea. Here's how we can implement it. And Bob, their boss, says, oh, wow, yeah, Jeff's actually really brilliant. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and organize that? And, me and Amy are going to sit there and help him get there. And we're going to be there when he says, wow, this was actually a really stupid idea. A theory is a theory. Sometimes your theory is proven correct. Sometimes your theory is wrong. Sometimes your idea just doesn't hold water. That's the reality of it. And when you start saying things like, I'm an idiot, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm a miserable failure, we have to be there for our peers to say, no, it was actually a really solid theory. Let's just take a step back and reevaluate it and see where it leads. Obviously it didn't go the direction we thought it was going to go, but it's going to go somewhere. This is still a really good path. So let's get you back on it. We have to teach our peers, and we have to mentor the people that are coming up, to encourage disciplined risk-taking. I'll get questions at the end. We want to encourage disciplined risk-taking in our peers, in our colleagues, and help them bring themselves up. And we have to do this by handing over control. We have to give them the opportunity to succeed, which is also the opportunity to fail. And when they do fail, and it will happen, we all fail. Every single one of us has failed at some point. We have to be a safety net, and we have to be there to catch them and help course correct and get things back on track. We need to take risks on the new guy. And mentorship is beyond just being kind. It is helping them brainstorm. It's when they don't have an idea and we're trying to spark that innovation, because we know that they have a different perspective. So if we get them talking about it and maybe flowchart some of their ideas and show how they could possibly implement this, it will encourage them to innovate and be more creative and bring that new perspective. Blank page syndrome is a bitch. When you are staring at a blank page, whether it be your conference talk submission or, the next project, feature that you're going to add to your product, it sucks. No one likes to stare at a blank paper. We need to have those conversations. We need to have those conversations with each other, and we need to be willing to accept that ideas that come out of those conversations, collectively, we arrived at it, but whoever blurted it out, it's their idea and they get to run with it. Even if we help them lead them there, we can't take credit for other people's ideas. One of the other things that I've used in helping my mentees is rubber duck programming. Have you heard this? For those that are not coders, the idea behind rubber duck programming is that if you explain the problem to a rubber duck, line by line, you explain your code as you're debugging it. By explaining it to the rubber duck, you're going to find your logic errors. It actually turns out to be a great teaching resource as well. When I first started out at Rapid7, I was tasked with teaching our advanced course that involved, API in Ruby, which I was comfortable with, and SQL, which I think I took a SQL class once and I fell asleep. So I thought I had it, I thought I understood it, and I went to go teach it, and I just froze. So I called up one of the senior guys on my team who taught it before over lunch. We broke for lunch, and I just called him up real quick, and I said, explain this to me line by line. And he did. The whole lunch hour, every query, he broke them down. And then I got back on the call with my students, and I regurgitated it to them, and we both learned it. By the end of that session, we both understood it. Because teaching it to a rubber duck or your dog or your colleague or someone that's coming up in the industry, all of these things will help you to learn by processing that. Much like Men in Black, you have Old and Busted, that's me, and the new hotness, that's these guys. It's hard not being the new hotness. It sucks sometimes. We're going to get old. Our knowledge, our expertise is going to become irrelevant. He who dies with the most exploits still dies. At the end of it, when the applause dies down, no one cares that you wrote an amazing exploit in 1998. Sure, it might have led to some other innovations and people might remember you once or twice in passing, but that's not your legacy. I'll leave you with this story. A friend of mine in the security community a number of years ago, really young guy, very brilliant, very inspirational, had huge impact on our community, very integral part of our community, had passed away in a car accident. And it was rough. He was the youngest of us. We didn't actually know how young he was because I met him at a bar and he said, "It's my 21st birthday. I've been waiting for this day for 19 years. So we're pretty sure that he was somewhere in his early 20s. Even his family got his age wrong on his obituary the first time. So he was a very, very young guy, but had made a huge impact in his time. And even thinking back on him, 11, 12 years later, I remember at his funeral, the room was probably 4 times the size of this room at the funeral home, and it was standing room only. It was absolutely packed. All of the rows were packed. And his brother had come up and was talking about how he would bring his brother out on IT gigs, dropping cables, building servers, and his brother learned from him. He was a mentor, and he did it in this very lighthearted way that really made an impression. And we go to the burial, and there's just a line of cars, miles as far as the eye can see, this huge line of cars with their blinkers on. And we laid him to rest, and we went to our friend's house, and we were just reminiscing about all of the things that he had contributed to us, all of the changes he had made in our lives. And it was really inspiring. And the one thing that left me with is the knowledge that you are remembered by those whose lives you change. At the end of the day, it's not that exploit that you wrote or that tool that you published or any of the things that you did. The reason that people remember you is because you changed their life. If one person can say, on the day that I have passed, that she changed my life, then I know that my legacy is going to survive me. Thank you. All right, you had a quick question?
No, I was going to make a statement, but you covered it after I put my hand back down, so there's no need for me to say more.
Awesome.